Have you ever noticed how some people will carry 10 bags at once, struggle silently, and still say, no, I've got it, even when it's obvious they absolutely do not have it? You offer help, they smile politely, maybe even laugh, and somehow they keep struggling anyway. Or maybe you recognize this feeling from the inside. Your phone battery is dying, your schedule is collapsing, your stress is quietly stacking up, and yet asking for help feels strangely harder than solving everything alone. You'd rather stay up all night figuring it out yourself than send one simple message, "Can you help me?" It's not stubbornness, not exactly pride, and definitely not independence in the way people usually think. Because beneath the habit of never asking for help lives a surprisingly complex psychology, one shaped by trust, identity, past experiences, and sometimes invisible emotional rules we learned long ago. So why do some people almost never reach out, even when they need to? And what does that quiet self-reliance actually reveal about how they see the world and themselves? Let's look closer. First, there's the person who learned early that help wasn't guaranteed. Picture a child trying to solve problems alone, tying their own shoes badly, figuring out homework quietly, managing emotions without much guidance. Maybe when they asked for help, adults were busy. Maybe support came with criticism. Maybe vulnerability felt inconvenient to others. Over time, the brain makes a simple but powerful calculation. Relying on others feels uncertain. Relying on yourself feels safer. As adults, these people don't consciously think, "I can't trust anyone." Instead, they think, "It's easier if I just handle it." Independence becomes less of a choice and more of an emotional reflex. Psychologically, this connects to what researchers call self-reliance as emotional protection. Asking for help activates risk, the risk of rejection, disappointment, or feeling small again. So they avoid the request entirely. You might notice this in yourself if compliments make you uncomfortable, or if accepting assistance feels like owing someone something. Help doesn't feel neutral, it feels emotionally expensive. Then there's another profile, the quiet caretaker. You know this person, the one everyone goes to for advice, the reliable friend, the emotional anchor in the group. They remember birthdays, check in on others, solve problems calmly, but when they struggle, silence. Because their identity is built around being the strong one, the helper, the stable presence. Asking for help creates a strange identity conflict. If I need support, who am I then? This mindset often forms through positive reinforcement. People praise them for being dependable, mature, or resilient. Over time, strength becomes performance, and performances are hard to pause. Psychologically, this links to role internalization. When someone is consistently rewarded for being supportive, they may unconsciously suppress their own needs to maintain that role. They're not pretending, they genuinely believe others need help more than they do. But here's the twist. The more capable someone appears, the less help others offer, which quietly reinforces the cycle. Maybe you know someone like this. Maybe people often say to you, "You always seem so put together," and you wonder why no one notices when you're not. Another type rarely asks for help because they equate it with weakness, even if they would never judge others that way. Imagine someone facing a problem at work. They spend hours researching instead of asking a colleague, not because they dislike teamwork, but because competence feels tied to self-worth. If they ask for help, it feels like proof they should have known already. This mindset often grows in environments where mistakes were punished or excellence was expected. Over time, the brain links asking questions with exposure and exposure with shame. So they over-prepare, overwork, overthink. Psychologists sometimes call this conditional self-esteem. I'm okay as long as I'm capable. And asking for help temporarily threatens that identity. Ironically, these individuals often admire collaboration in others. They just hold themselves to harsher rules. Sound familiar? Then there's the deeply independent thinker, the person who genuinely prefers solving things alone. This one is subtle because it isn't rooted in fear as much as control. Picture someone facing a personal decision. Advice pours in from friends and family, but instead of relief, they feel overwhelmed. Too many perspectives dilute their clarity. Solitude helps them hear their own thoughts. For these individuals, independence is tied to autonomy, a core psychological need. Asking for help can feel like surrendering authorship over their own life. They don't avoid people, they avoid influence. Their inner dialogue sounds like, "I need to understand this myself." And in many ways, this trait can be healthy. Self-directed problem-solving builds confidence and resilience. But the shadow side appears when independence becomes isolation, when collaboration feels intrusive instead of supportive. Because humans aren't designed to regulate life entirely alone, even if we sometimes wish we were. But here's something surprising. People who rarely ask for help are often highly empathetic towards others' struggles. They notice discomfort quickly. They offer assistance instinctively. Why? Because they understand struggle intimately. They just don't externalize their own. There's a quiet emotional rule operating underneath. I don't want to burden anyone the way I fear being a burden myself. And that word, burden, sits at the center of much of this psychology. Many self-reliant people overestimate how inconvenient their needs are to others. Studies on social support repeatedly show something fascinating. People generally feel closer to those they help. Helping creates connection, not annoyance. But perception matters more than reality. If someone believes their needs are too much, they'll minimize them indefinitely. And over time, this creates a paradox. The person who needs connection most becomes the least likely to request it. So, what changes this pattern? Usually, not advice, not persuasion, experience. Moments where vulnerability is met with warmth instead of judgment. Small acts of safe dependence. Realizing that asking for help doesn't erase competence, it expands it. Because psychologically, asking for help isn't a failure of independence, it's a form of social intelligence. It signals trust. It allows reciprocity. It tells the nervous system, I don't have to survive everything alone. And maybe the real shift happens when people redefine strength, not as carrying everything silently, but as knowing when sharing the weight makes life richer. So now, pause for a moment. Which of these feels closest to you? The early self-reliant survivor? The dependable caretaker? The perfection-driven achiever? The fiercely independent thinker? Or maybe you move between them depending on the season of your life. Notice how you react the next time someone offers help. Do you decline automatically? Do you explain why you're fine before checking if you actually are? And if this reflection resonated with you or reminded you of someone quietly carrying too much, share your thoughts below. Conversations like this help us recognize patterns we usually keep hidden. Because sometimes the strongest shift begins with a small sentence many of us are still learning to say. I could use a little help. And surprisingly, that sentence doesn't make people think less of you. It often makes them feel closer than ever.